Hello all of you beautiful people, Jules here for WhatCulture.com, and if there is one film that I adore above all else, it is John Carpenter's absolutely towering 1982 masterwork, The Thing. Based on the 1938 novella Who Goes There and following the original 1951 adaptation The Thing from Another World, Carpenter's The Thing has held firm as one of the most blisteringly intense and unforgettably violent genre films, and say it with me kids, of all time! And of course, it's drawn in fans from all across the world to study this film over and over again. Yet here are some facts that you might not have known about this absolute masterpiece. As I'm Jules, this is WhatCulture.com, and these are 20 things you didn't know about The Thing. Number 20. Jeff Bridges and Nick Nolte turned down the role of MacReady. Impossible though it might seem to imagine anyone else but Kurt Russell playing the part of protagonist R.J. MacReady, the role was actually offered to two other actors before it came his way. Nick Nolte and Jeff Bridges were both given the opportunity to play MacReady but ended up turning it down for undisclosed reasons, while Kevin Kline was also briefly suggested by the studio, who felt the film needed greater star power. Curiously, screenwriter Bill Lancaster actually wrote MacReady with the likes of Harrison Ford and Clint Eastwood in mind, though it isn't public knowledge whether they were ever approached to appear. Either way, Russell was actually quite low down on a sizable list of lead actors, no matter his existing working relationship with Carpenter. Number 19. Rob Bottin was just 22 years old when he created the creature effects. Even those who don't much care for The Thing can't deny the brilliance of its creativity and grotesque creature effects, which were provided by effects creator Rob Bottin when he was just 22 years of age. Carpenter had previously sought out special effects legend Rick Baker for the gig, but Baker's schedule wouldn't allow it. Not so coincidentally, the very same year Baker won the first of 7 Oscars for his sublime makeup effects work on An American Werewolf in London, and so Bottin ended up getting the job, commanding a team of over 40 technicians while also collaborating with effects legend Stan Winston, who helped create the dog thing, which was featured in the film. Bottin ended up working 7 days a week for over a year to get the effects completed, after which he was reportedly hospitalized with exhaustion and pneumonia. His passion nearly literally killed him. Number 18. The opening title was achieved totally practically. The Thing's opening title sequence is easily one of cinema's all-time most memorable, burning out onto the screen while a misty light leaks in behind them. And though you might assume that this was produced through some early visual effects trickery, it was actually an elegantly simple and totally practical process. The film's title designer simply drew the title onto an animated cell and then stuck the cell on the back of a fish tank filled with smoke and lights. Then they covered the fish tank with a black plastic bag and lit the bag on fire, resulting in a gradual title reveal that any sufficiently motivated person could pull off at home, but my advice, open a window first. Number 17. The Norwegian dialogue at the start of the film actually spells out the entire movie. The film opens with a chaotic scene where a Norwegian pilot chases a sled dog to the American research station, resulting in the man being shot in self-defense. But before he dies, he shouts at the assembled crew in Norwegian, and though this isn't subtitled, anyone with a knowledge of the Norwegian language would actually have had a leg up on the story that's about to unfold. The pilot actually shouts at the men, "Get the hell out of there, that's not a dog, it's some sort of thing, it's imitating a dog, it isn't real, get away you idiots." Granted, the guy probably could have made a better case for himself by keeping calm and not, blowing up his helicopter, but he's also clearly seen what the thing's capable of firsthand, so we'll give him the benefit of the doubt. Number 16. The budget was actually uncommonly high for the horror genre. A $15 million budget might sound like chump change nowadays, but in 1982 it was quite a hefty sum for a horror film. Considering that Carpenter's own Halloween cost just $325,000 a few years prior, and also that Poltergeist released the same year and cost just $10.7 million. Even so, Universal initially attempted to skimp on the film's creature effects budget, offering a mere $200,000 to Rob Bottin and his team, which was still more than they'd ever allocated for a monster movie before, but the team needed at least $750,000, which the studio begrudgingly agreed to. But it didn't help, however, because effects costs ended up skyrocketing to an immense $1.5 million by the end of production, and that's 10% of the entire final budget. In the end, though, it clearly worked out for the best artistically, though Universal might not agree given that The Thing only grossed $19.6 million at the box office. Ouch. Number 15. The computer voice is actually John Carpenter's ex-wife. It's often noted by critics that The Thing doesn't contain a single woman amongst its main cast, though according to Carpenter, he originally planned to have a female member of the crew, only to change plans once the unknown actress in question fell pregnant. pregnant. Therefore, the only female character in the entire movie, and if you can call it that, is that of Macready's chess computer, who happens to be voiced by none other than actress Adrienne Barbeau. In addition to appearing in Carpenter's previous films The Fog and Escape from New York, she was also married to the director from 1979 to 1990, so it's actually not terribly surprising that he'd pick his wife to play the film's small and single female role. Number 14. A double amputee was used for the defibrillator scene. Surely the most memorable scene in the entire film is the traumatic defibrillation sequence where poor Dr. Copper attempts to revive Norris only for Norris's chest cavity to open up, turn into teeth, and bite Copper's arms clean off. The horrifying scene was achieved by having a double amputee serve as a stand-in for Copper, whilst wearing false arms that could be torn away by the practical effect. But Carpenter also wanted to take things further, and so had the double wear a mask for the entire wide shot as well. Now, it's pretty obvious when you're looking for it, but most viewers are so distracted by the severed limbs that the last place that they're looking is actually Copper's face. Number 13. Most of the film was shot on refrigerated Los Angeles sound stages. Carpenter's production designers did a fantastic job convincing audiences that the thing was actually shot entirely Antarctic Research Station, with location shoots in Juneau, Alaska and Stewart, British Columbia, standing in for the snow-topped locale. But many of the interiors were actually filmed on sound stages in Los Angeles, and in order to match the chilliness of the exterior shoots, these sets had to be artificially cooled with air conditioners, bringing them down to -2 degrees, which makes it all the weirder when you realize that it was 38 degrees outside at the time of shooting. Universal executives initially suggested shooting these portions of the film in cold storage lockers, but when the producers saw how claustrophobic and impractical they were for shooting, they quickly decided against it. Number 12. Carl Weathers, Ernie Hudson, and Isaac Hayes were considered for Childs. Much like Kurt Russell as Macready, it's difficult to accept anyone but Keith David playing the role of Childs, despite the fact that it was actually David's first ever major movie role. As such, Universal had numerous other actors in the mix for Childs, including the infinitely more famous likes of Carl Weathers, Ernie Hudson, and Isaac Hayes, with Hudson reportedly almost winning the part outright, yet it ultimately went to David, presumably due to that irresistibly velvety voice, kickstarting an insanely prolific career spanning over 4 decades, as well as over 300 roles across TV, film, and video games to date. Number 11. Ennio Morricone recycled unused music from this film for The Hateful Eight. Though the casual listener might assume that John Carpenter composed the film's musical score himself, as he so often does for his movies, in this case it was actually created by the late, great Ennio Morricone, of course known for his legendary compositions for Sergio Leone's spaghetti western classics. In a move that will remain baffling until the end of time, Morricone ended up being nominated for a Razzie for his tense, pulsing, decidedly Carpenter-esque score. But more than 30 years later, Morricone also recycled some unused material from this movie while scoring Quentin Tarantino's The Hateful Eight. Ironically, that score finally won him a long overdue Best Original Score Oscar, which kind of begs the question, can we now consider The Thing as an Oscar-winning film? Number 10. Keith David broke his hand the day before filming started. Though The Thing served as Keith David's Hollywood breakthrough, fate almost had other plans altogether, as he ended up breaking his hand in a car accident the day before shooting began. After reporting to set, he was sent to hospital by Carpenter, where he was fitted with a surgical glove and wore another glove on top of it to match his skin color, in turn concealing the injury enough for the casual observer. This explains why David's left hand is largely kept off camera for the first half of the film as the injury was healing up. Number 9. Stop-motion monster scenes were filmed but rejected. Though the bulk of the film's Thing effects are ingenious works of vile puppetry, there was an original plan to use stop-motion animation for Macready's final encounter with the Blair Thing monster. Stop-motion legend Randall William Cook, who later won 3 Oscars for his visual effects work on the Lord of the Rings trilogy, created a miniature model of the film set and created wide shots of the Blair Thing flailing around. However, Carpenter was unhappy with the end result, and so only ended up using a few seconds of Cook's work in the final film. Number 8. Macready is a PTSD-afflicted Vietnam veteran. Though Carpenter didn't waste much time at all on backstories for his characters, he did confirm that he and Kurt Russell laid out their own internal origin story for Macready. They conceived of the hero as a former Vietnam War helicopter pilot suffering from PTSD, who in addition to being an alcoholic also wrestles with insomnia. And there are a few hints to this peppered throughout the film, such as why Macready is both awake and drinking in the early hours of the morning when the Norwegian dog arrives, and also while he tells Charles that he's a real light sleeper. Number 7. Tobe Hooper was considered to direct. Even more so than the the indelible two-hander of Kurt Russell and Keith David, it's tough to picture anyone but John Carpenter directing this movie, and indeed he was certainly the first choice of producers Lawrence Turnman and David Foster. However, Universal had other ideas in the early developmental stages, feeling that Tobe Hooper, who they already had under contract, might be a better fit for the material. Hooper even wrote 2 drafts of the screenplay himself, designed in this place as a horror comedy without the shape-shifting element, neither of which luckily made a dent with executives. After the success of Halloween, Universal hired Carpenter, causing The Thing's co-producer Stuart Cohen to later comment of Hooper's original version as, "We avoided a disaster. It would have been one of the worst movies ever made." Yikes. Number 6. It was not successful upon release. It's tough to imagine this today, where The Thing is frequently hailed as being one of the most creative and iconic sci-fi films ever made, but back in 1982, neither audiences nor critics really cared that much for it. For the music, critics were mostly frosty, expressing frustration over the film's nihilistic tone and excessive gore, and it also failed to rustle up much business at the box office. Speculation continues that audiences enamored with the likes of Steven Spielberg's E.T., which was released just weeks prior, weren't in the mood for such a brutal alien invasion film. Carpenter ended up losing his multi-film deal with Universal over this film's failure, and was only vindicated years later when it became a cult gem on home video. Curiously, it was released the very same day as Blade Runner, another film which was met with hostility on its initial release before being redeemed later on. Maybe there was just something going on at the time. Number 5. A 4-hour miniseries was originally planned for 2003. Though a 2011 prequel film was eventually produced, and my god, I wish it hadn't been, back in 2005 plans were set in motion for a 4-hour sequel miniseries, Return of the Thing, to be aired on the Sci-Fi Channel. The miniseries was going to be produced by the mind behind The Shawshank Redemption and written by David Leslie Johnson McGoldrick, and was going to be set 23 years later with a Russian team discovering MacReady and Child's bodies, while also unearthing the Thing once again, causing it to get loose in Mexico. While many fans would prefer the fates of the protagonist to remain ambiguous, the change of setting certainly sounded a good deal more interesting than the prequel, though Universal ultimately passed on the miniseries in favor of said prequel. Number 4. Lee Van Cleef, Brian Denny, and Donald Pleasance almost played supporting roles. Beyond the host of actors who were considered for the 2 main roles, the wider ensemble cast also attracted a host of appealing and, you know what, very famous performers. For the role of Station Commander Gary, the inimitable Lee Van Cleef, who appeared in Carpenter's Escape from New York the year prior, was also in consideration. Elsewhere, the great Brian Dennehy was in the running to play Dr. Copper, to the point that Carpenter allegedly very nearly cast him, and Halloween's Donald Pleasance was actually Carpenter's original choice for Blair, but unfortunately had to drop out due to scheduling conflicts. Though none of the eventual cast members can be faulted, it sure would have been something to see the likes of these 3 chewing up the screen together alongside Russell and David. Number 3. The Thing's final form required 50 technicians to operate. MacReady's explosive final standoff with the Blair Thing sees the creature now transformed into a gigantic tentacled worm-like monster. Unsurprisingly, operating this practical and very expensive puppet, as well as executing every other aspect of the final sequence in tandem, was an utter nightmare, requiring combined simultaneous efforts of 50 technicians. The end result, though, speaks for itself, and despite turning 40 years old next year, The Thing's climax still holds up as one of its most terrifying and visually stunning. Number 2. Universal agreed to the ambiguous ending on one condition. The Thing boasts one of the most ingeniously bleak endings ever, as an exhausted MacReady and Child sit amidst the fire remains of their research station, sharing a drink while unsure whether the other might in fact be The Thing. Unsurprisingly, the ending received pushback from the studio, and they only agreed on this ambiguous fate if it included a hint that The Thing may have been killed by the explosion. And so, when the station blows up, an added bestial scream was added to imply its death, even if most fans today assume that The Thing indeed survived. Ultimately, numerous endings were either shot or considered, such as one where MacReady is rescued while Childs dies, another where Childs wanders off into the snowy abyss, and one where both men are rescued by a chopper. Few, however, will argue with Carpenter's final decision. And number 1, Kurt Russell came up with the final line of dialogue. The movie's final line sees MacReady resigned to his fate and well aware that he will probably die, simply asking Childs, "Why don't we just wait here for a little while, see what happens?" It's a brilliant line that perfectly encompasses the film's nihilistic themes and ending. Yet it wasn't a piece of dialogue meticulously crafted by screenwriter Bill Lancaster. Rather, Kurt Russell actually came up with it himself during shooting, and considering the evidently grim-looking conditions of the shoot, that's even more impressive. Russell clearly proved himself as an able creative to Carpenter, given that the pair ended up co-writing Escape from LA more than a decade later, even if that was the weakest of their collaborations together. But that's not saying anything. This film here is still top of the body pile, baby. And there we go, my friends. Those were 20 things you didn't know about The Thing. I hope that you enjoyed that, and please let me know what you thought about it down in the comments section below. If you want to chat to me further on the social medias, you can go over to Twitter and type in Live and Let's Dice tweet or loud tweet to check when I'm tweeting about board games and streaming next, my friends. But before I go, I just want to say one thing. I hope that you are doing well, my friend, both mentally and physically, and treating yourself with love and respect, because you goddamn well deserve it, okay? Do not let anyone or anything else tell you otherwise. You're a massive ledge. Now go out there and absolutely smash your life goals today. As always, I've been Jules. You have been awesome. Never forget that, and I'll speak to you soon. Bye.